What's up, everybody? Tara Wellman here, and yes, I know it has been a minute or more, but it's the offseason. What do you expect from me? But that doesn't mean there isn't a lot to continue to talk about over the next several months. So, since there are not series to preview, instead, I'm going to flip the script and we're just going to talk more about the St. Louis Cardinals, because who doesn't want more of that? Like I said, over the course of the next couple of months, I'm going to recruit some fine folks to bring you the best information possible, starting today with the one and only Benjamin Hochman. He'll be joining me in just a bit. But if there are people you would like to see talk about your St. Louis Cardinals, hit me up. Let me know who you want me to talk to, and I'll try to keep bringing you some good information, some fun content, and who knows what else as we go along this winter. Before we get going too much further, I did want to give one giant shout out to Yadier Molina, the winner of the 2018 Roberto Clemente Award. Now, obviously at Birds on the Black, we spent a lot of time at the end of the season talking about what Yadier Molina has meant to St. Louis and to Puerto Rico, both on the field and off. And it is incredible to see him rewarded this way. There's so much to talk about as far as Molina is concerned, and I feel like the Cardinals community is so lucky, so blessed to have the opportunity to watch Yadier Molina continue to do what he does as an athlete and also as a humanitarian. So huge congrats to Molina and the family and the foundation. Thanks to all of you for helping us give back a little bit from Birds on the Black to Foundation for Yadi's Foundation that does so much great work in both Puerto Rico and in St. Louis. And I just felt like that needed a shout out. But back to the interview. Let's get to it. So Benjamin Hochman from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, thanks for joining me. How are you, good sir?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent.
FaceTime interview experience.
Well, we'll try to make it as painless as possible. No, there's always a lot to talk about in the off-season, even when there's not a lot of answers out there. So that's what we're going to do. I want to ask you about a number of things relating to Cardinals baseball, but let's start with this. I just got back from Seattle, and I want to bring this up. The Cardinals are the Seattle Mariners of the National League. Having talked to some Seattle fans in the last week, that's a bold statement.
At this point, right? I mean, what are the Cardinals? I mean, 3 years is an eternity in the two wild card team playoffs, and only a couple teams have not made the playoffs overall in the past 3 years. Most teams have made the playoffs at least once. The Cardinals haven't. The Mariners haven't. And I know, I mean, like, I've got all this Cardinals stuff here in the house. I mean, the Cardinals have a rich history. Don't get me wrong. But right now, how are they any different than some middling 80-plus win franchise that's good, not great?
Good, not great. I think that's important because in the season wrap-up press conference, we heard John Mozeliak talking about how this is a winning team and they have this winning tradition. And while by definition he's correct, winning seasons are maybe different than a winning team, at least in the perspective of, as you mentioned, a lot of opportunities to get in the playoffs and make something happen. There's kind of this weird disconnect, it feels like, between maybe the front office that sees, look, we've put together winning seasons for over a decade, and that's great, and the fan base that says, yeah, but you've missed the playoffs for 3 years in a row. Is it fair to feel like there's this sort of unrest because of the trend with this team?
It's fair. I mean, there's frustration, right? And the problem is John Mozeliak or any general manager or team president is not going to suddenly turn into a WWE wrestler, screaming like, we're going to win 100 games. This is what we're going to do. Like, I mean, it's just implausible to think that. And in a weird way, many fans want that. They're like, well, if only he would just show the same passion I have. Like, clearly, like, let's let's say it now. Like, clearly, John Mozeliak and Michael Gersh in the front office are dedicated and devoted to trying to make the playoffs. I mean, this is only their livelihoods and legacies on the line. The question, of course, is can they do it better? The answer is they better do it better. So how do they do it better? And it's not our money. But I mean, at some point, what they've done 3 years in a row has not worked. There's optimism with a lot of the young pitchers. There's optimism with the new manager. There's optimism at second base and catcher and some of the positions. But the Brewers have made the NLCS the past 4 years, counting 2015. A team from the division has made the Final Four of baseball, and it wasn't the Cardinals. How do the Cardinals get there? You'd have to think it's spending money. How much are they willing to spend on Bryce Harper?
I think that's part of it, because it's not just that the Cardinals haven't made the postseason, right? It's that they're also losing ground in their own division. And you feel like, yeah, it's great to try to make a wild card spot your goal, although I feel like you maybe should set your expectations a little bit higher. But nonetheless, when you continue to lose ground within the division and you see the Brewers go out and make changes, the Cubs do what they've done, obviously that's not the way that Mozeliak and company want to be successful, but it's a little harder to swallow missing out on the fun of October baseball when you also see two other teams in your division get that chance. And maybe do it in a different way. So like you said, there's money to be spent. I just told someone on Twitter, it's not my money, give it all to Bryce Harper. But the point, I think, is the Cardinals have been really intentional about building from the bottom up, right? And that's great. I don't know that you can develop a superstar. I think they kind of are what they are at some point, and that seems to be what the Cardinals are missing, and what they might very well have to go out and use that money that we keep hearing about to get.
Yeah, it's a conversation that's always tricky for people like you and me to have, because we point to the late Oscar Taveras and say, what if? And clearly the Cardinals, to their credit, had developed what seemed like a potential all-star slugger who, of course, passed away. Can you do that again? I mean, yes, it stinks. I mean, they imagine if Oscar was out there in right field right now. But also he wasn't guaranteed to be an all-star. He just seemed to be trending in that way. So, of course, they probably aren't going to have a top 15, top 20 OPS guy come through their system. So you gotta buy that guy. I mean, that's the reality. If you look at these teams, I mean, the Cardinals had, I don't have this computer in front of me, I believe they had one dude over 4 WAR with Carpenter. And like all these playoff teams had 2, 3 offensive guys above 4 WAR. So you're not, even if you are going to develop, even if Nolan Gorman is that guy, that ain't until 2022 or whatever. We're talking about how it's been 3 years out of the playoffs. Look, if they say we're waiting for Nolan Gorman, at that point, we're moving to Seattle. We're becoming Mariners fans or something, picking poison. No, I mean, the reality, of course, is they need to do something. The Bryce Harper situation seems the most ideal. The Josh Donaldson situation seems the most realistic and most Cardinals-esque.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about both of those, but I did want to jump back to one of the things that you mentioned there, and that is that there's potential down the road, right? But I feel like part of the dissatisfaction right now is that I know John Mozeliak doesn't like talking about windows, but it does feel like there's a little bit of an era we're sort of seeing the end of it, right? With Adam Wainwright, with Yadier Molina coming to I don't know, maybe he'll play forever at this point. But in theory, coming to the final years of his career, maybe not maybe we have seen peak Matt Carpenter. It just feels like there's a time in Cardinals history or in the present right now that makes the most sense to invest in if you're going to try to do something with a lot of the pieces that you already have. So to me, again, from where I'm sitting, not spending my money on Bryce Harper, it makes a lot of sense to do something to try to put them over that hump because of all the other pieces that they already have.
Yeah, or if anything, what they're doing isn't working, or it's not working well enough, and that's what Mozeliak was saying with the at the postseason press conference, he goes, apparently 88 wins is not good enough. So, okay, but it's not, because even if they had 88 and made the playoffs, like, maybe they would have a fun 2006 type run or whatever, but we would still enter the offseason saying, like, that was fun, but I mean, the Brewers are still the Brewers and the Cubs are still the Cubs. And the Dodgers are still the Dodgers and the Rockies. I mean, there's a lot of good teams in the National League. So the question, of course, is how do you grow the offense, assuming – and then that's the other thing is, like, last year, if I was on the FaceTime with you, I probably been like, well, one thing, Tara, that we can pencil in is a great season from starting pitcher Carlos Martinez. Like, of course, he'll be great. And then it's the other – well, that – blew up in our faces. And of course, Miles Michaelis was one of the greatest free agent signings in team history. And imagine where they would have been without him and his production because of Carlos's inconsistency. So, but yeah, here we are now in 2018 saying, like, you'd think that they could find 5 pretty good starting pitchers out of the 11 that they have. Okay, if we're relying on that, how do you build the bullpen and how do you build the offense?
Yeah, there were a number of things that should have gone right this last season that didn't. So you sort of have to expect some bit of rebound there, but also, you never know who else is going to have a down year the next time around. Let's talk about Bryce Harper, because I feel like we're very much on the same page as far as Harper is concerned, in that he seems to check all the boxes for the Cardinals in a way that no, not many other guys could. And full disclosure, I've not always been the world's biggest Bryce Harper fan. But he's really, he has that thing that the Cardinals haven't had in a long time. He's a left-handed hitter, which, again, a thing they haven't had in a while. And he brings so much to what I think could be this really great blend of Bryce Harper and the St. Louis tradition. It's a high price tag. I mean, going around on Twitter today, the word is 10 years, $350 million. If, again, it's not my money, but sign the check and send it now. That's how I feel about Bryce Harper and the Cardinals this year.
If there was ever a time in Cardinals history to splurge on a free agent, it's after 3 years of being adequate and having one of the prodigies of this sport available for his age 26 season plus all these years on the free agent market. Like, this is the time to splurge. Yes, he will have those years later. He will have those Pujols Angels years, and we will acknowledge that. And, Ben, Fred, and I, and Derek, and Rick Hummel, and the writers will have to acknowledge that we were pro Harper in 2018, and now it's 2028, and he's, gray bearding it and hitting 220 with a 260 on base percentage and making up Bryce Harper's numbers for 2028. Will there even be a world in 2028? That's another thing. And also, so that was kind of me being funny, but I will be serious in this regard. Like, Bill DeWitt has one life to live, right? One life to live. And he's had a lot of fun. They've won the championship a couple times under his watch. But, like, golly, like, none of us are getting any younger. If there was ever a time, again, to use the word splurge and just take this shot, it's when you have 2 other teams in your division that are also really good. Bryce Harper is available. And also, and again, like, a lot of things is, like, we in the media and the fans, we talk about the idea of, like, the sales pitch as if it's going to be like this. They bring in Nelly, he's rapping about St. Louis, and we get fun in our heads thinking about it. But the reality is, there are some sales pitch aspects to it that the Cardinals could use to their advantage beyond just, great fans and all that, because we know that Harper likes that, if only from those tweets he put out there, that he loves the fans and the history of all that. But the answer is this, like, Bryce, do you want to be Kevin Durant? Do you want to go to the Yankees and join Aaron Judge and join Stanton and join, Luke Voigt, of course, who's the next Babe Ruth, and then join all these guys and be one of them? Or do you want to come to St. Louis, a team that has 88 wins, has some good pieces, and you are the missing piece? You are clearly the face of the franchise. You're clearly the best player on the team, and you are inevitably the reason why they make the playoffs. Like, if I'm Bryce Harper, like, that's pretty enticing to me.
And I feel like more that I know a lot of people have Manny Machado is obviously the other big piece that's going to go somewhere. I think you can sell Bryce Harper on St. Louis. I don't think you can sell Manny Machado on St. Louis. And that's very speculative because I don't know either of them personally, right? I don't know what it is going to take to sell either one of them other than a lot of money. But from everything that we can kind of piece together, Bryce Harper seems to be more the guy that you can sell on that than Manny Machado. And that's part of the reason I just keep going back to he seems to fit so much more. And to your point, he's 26 now. Even if they sign a 10-year contract, he's going to be 36 at the end of the contract. That's not, I mean, it's not, the prime of his career, but it's also not ancient.
Right, exactly. Well, I have Manny Machado right here. We can ask him. I'm just kidding. No, but you're right about Machado. I think it's because of these aspects. He's currently on the Dodgers, so he's like in the World Series on a team like the Dodgers, literally the Dodgers. So he's like, wow, this ain't bad. And then you look at New York and the tradition of that side of the infield to be the next Jeter, to be the next A-Rod. Again, if he's cool with playing with Judge and Stanton, which many humans would be, that would be a nice fit. Can you imagine that 2-3-4, or that 3-4-5, or whatever it would be? I mean, it's mind-boggling. Yeah, I mean, and then Ben Fred, my columnist colleague, wrote a pretty good piece about Machado's antics in the postseason. And yeah, you watch him, you're like, that's not what I want around here. Kicking Aguilar. I mean, that was Bush League. So that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. But yeah, if Manny was like, you know what, I want to join forces with Yadier Molina and Jack Flaherty and Carlos Martinez, and like we're like, yeah, please come. Yes, we will take you, Manny Machado.
Oh, absolutely. But, I can't get the image out of my head. I mentioned this several weeks ago, and it's become a talking point of an outfield of Bryce Harper, Harrison Bader, and Tyler O'Neill. Because just picture it.
Oh, let us picture this hair these outfielders will have. As someone who often has longer hair, I look forward to watching these mains, if you will, patrol the outfield at Busch.
Absolutely agree. All right, let's talk a little bit about Josh Donaldson because, as you mentioned, that's the more Cardinals choice, right? I'm not sure when Josh Donaldson sort of became like that second tier, I guess we'll take him, but
Right.
the injuries have sort of played into that and made him less of a sure thing. Obviously not quite the prodigy that Bryce Harper has always been, but a potential upgrade for sure for the Cardinals offensively, and it sort of helps answer some of the questions on the infield.
No question about it. And a fair comparison is the Lance Berkman acquisition a couple years ago, where you get a guy in his 30s who's had an amazing career that still has something in the tank. And yeah, they could probably get Josh Donaldson for a cheaper. Somebody will get Josh Donaldson for a cheaper amount than they would have a year ago. He's coming off the calf injury, and there's a lot of question marks about the guy. But yeah, I mean, the reality is, like, if Bryce Harper goes to Philadelphia, Machado stays with the Dodgers, and the Cardinals get Donaldson and, I don't know, somebody, and Adam Ottavino, is that a playoff team? Or, I mean, and I think no, or I think maybe, but then we're back in the late, I loved the late 80s. But I love the late 80s. Great music, great movies, but I don't like I'm messing up my own joke. The high 80s. The whole point is what I'm trying to say. I'm sure you can just delete that out. No problem with your editing. I'm sure you've got a whole team of editors. The whole point is in the high 80s win total, that doesn't guarantee you anything.
And I think what Donaldson and maybe a pitcher would do is kind of puts you back in that position where, yeah, if everybody has a great year, then you have a great team. But there's not really a fallback, right? If Ozuna doesn't rebound like you're expecting him to, if Dexter Fowler isn't great, and Tyler O'Neill maybe isn't quite ready for that, And, then maybe Matt Carpenter isn't the August version of Matt Carpenter all the time. You're kind of putting yourself right on that edge where if everything doesn't go right, there's not a lot of room for error.
Exactly. And it comes back to what do you want to be if you're the Cardinals? And like maybe part of the problem is that they've excelled in the past. I mean, like if the Cardinals, and this is dumb, like they're like a expansion team with 3 years like this, you're like, all right, maybe they need to upgrade. But they're like, no, we've done it before. But the question is, when did they do it before? What era of analytics did they do it before? What era of the division they're in did they do it before? A lot of their success came when the Cubs were terrible. I mean, they got a lot of wins against those 2011 to 2014 Cubs, if you will. Something that bothers me is when people are just like, Zalak's dumb. Like, no, he's not dumb. I mean, these people, their whole lives, they spend hours and hours looking at computer screens, stats we've never heard of, the whole thing. They're not dumb. It's just a question of how they are going to approach the offseason differently than the way they had, because their strategy didn't work fully, clearly, because I'm not at a Cardinal playoff game right now. I'm in my living room.
Well, and let's be clear, to that point, I know that John Mozeliak likes people to remember this. They were going to give a lot of money to Giancarlo Stanton if he just agreed to the deal, right? So it's not as if they're as an organization staunchly opposed to $300 million contracts. It's not, that was money and players, right? So that was even a different sort of balance of currency, if you will. So it's not like they won't go there if it's the right piece. It's just a matter of getting that person on board as well, and maybe going a little further than the comfort zone allows for.
Exactly. And we don't have the numbers in front of us, but somebody is going to pay more money than we anticipate even right now for Bryce Harper. Who is that somebody?
Yeah.
What team they? Yeah.
That is the question to answer. One other thing I wanted to talk about, sort of going away from players and more just with the team. There was a lot of talk off and on this season. It kind of came back again at the end of the year with attendance at Cardinals games this year. And some of that, again, another box that I think Bryce Harper checks is people are going to come see him play. How much do you make of that? Because at the beginning of the season, the weather was terrible. At the end of the year, people are back in school. There are a lot of reasons for these things, but it was a real story that a lot of people were talking about.
Yeah, and I've written a lot about it for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and our website, and it's a very fascinating situation. Now, the numbers show that they're selling tickets, and the numbers show that they're made the 3.4 million. We know all about it, and we also know, compared to most other fan bases, most other cities, the Cardinals do really well in attendance. So if we're comparing to other towns and be like, oh, why are you pointing out the Cardinals situation? Why don't you point at the other 20 whatever teams that aren't doing well? But for me, as someone who's from St. Louis, who's written a book about the St. Louis Cardinals, whose life is covering and following the St. Louis Cardinals, you look at that Brewers series where the Brewers came to town and the Cardinals were on the cusp and in fact, if I recall correctly, they entered the series in a wild card spot. So it's not like, oh, if crazy things happen, we're in the playoffs. They were in the playoffs. They just hold on. And I talk with my hands a lot. And nobody came. And I know it was a weeknights, and it was school had started. And believe me, I'm acknowledging that. But I mean, it was desolate at the stadium. There were huge sections just of empty seats, and it was weird. It was the first time I was like, this is weird. But then there's so many other aspects to it, right? Does it mean, and we can talk about it, like, does it mean that the fans are just kind of like meh because we don't have a superstar, and even if we make the playoffs, we'll probably lose anyway because we're just the Cardinals, and those teams are the Cubs and the Brewers and the whomevers and the Dodgers and the whomevers? Or is it, and I wrote this, like I'm looking at my TV right now, like TVs these days are pretty nice. Like these are like Jetson-like TVs, and they do an amazing job with the Cardinals broadcast. Danny Mack, I think talk about most underrated Cardinals. I think Danny Mac might be the most underrated Cardinal. He's a fantastic broadcaster, and you got Scott Warman, the Iron Horse, doing every post game, pregame show, the whole thing. It's a good experiment. So of course you got the family aspect, or even just a single, the one lone person going to the game. You got to pay a bunch of money to do so. You got to pay to park. You got to pay for food. You got to pay for everything. And it's cold, and it's a weeknight, and Johnny's got soccer, and Sally's got homework, and whatever it is. Oh, and the game's on TV right here in my free house where I have free food and the beer I want. Like, why am I driving 30 minutes downtown? I'm talking myself out of it right now. Like, why would I ever go to the stadium again? And that's the whole point. It's like, it's up to the Cardinals to all right, things are good now. We're still getting our 3.4 and the tickets are still selling. But man, if we have another mid-80s season, and then it looks like that. The biggest problem for them will be if the weekends start looking like the weekdays do. That's when they'll know they have a huge problem. But right now, I think it leads to fun dialogue. It leads to me commandeering this interview and just talking for 5 minutes about it. And it's very fascinating stuff, I think.
Does it feel like that's on the radar for the ownership as far as, what is or isn't happening or what those trends are, much less the ones on the field?
Yeah, I mean, again, we speak to these people at the stadium. I mean, there's people whose jobs are breaking down the numbers of attendance and the season tickets and the packages and the group things. And they do all these amazing creative things to get people in the ballpark. And with the, you think about how many people come to the game just because their kid's singing a song. There's many songs to sing. If anything, they should have more songs.
There you go. A song an inning.
They should have the 8-year-old kids sing the Budweiser song. No problem there. Have them sing, "Here comes the king, here comes the big number one." That's 200 tickets right there. No problem at all having kids singing a jingle about alcohol. So, yeah, yes, they are aware of everything. This isn't I'm smiling. This isn't a mom and pop organization, whereas there are situations where you can point to something and maybe say it is, but this is not a mom and pop organization. This is a company. This is a business, and but it's a changing business. It's a changing landscape.
Yeah, and I think that's the key on the field and at the stadium. But to your point, these are all people who are good at their jobs. They're all people who maybe don't give as much information as the consumers would like, but that's also part of their jobs. When you hear John Mozeliak sort of talk in circles, it's always funny to me because he'll give this very seemingly well thought out answer, and then you go and listen back later and you're like, he didn't actually say much there. Right. But that's intentional, right? He's not. They're not going to give all of the information that's available because that's not really anyone else's business but theirs.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And again, we know they care. We know they want to win, but are they doing it right? I mean, we see it all the time. Mike Matheny and Barry Odom, right? Barry Odom, the football coach in Mizzou, he played for the Tigers. Mike Matheny had his greatest years playing for the St. Louis Cardinals. It's not like he didn't care. Not like he didn't want it. It's a matter of execution. And some people aren't as good at jobs as other people. And that's why some people aren't in those jobs anymore.
Yeah. And the work of the offseason has only just begun for all of them, I'm sure. Well, Benjamin, I don't want to take up any more of your time this morning, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, very fun. Anytime you want to hear me ramble on about the St. Louis Cardinals, I'm here to do so.
Sounds great. Thanks so much. And we'll probably circle back closer to the season, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Just think, everybody, this is only the beginning. Only 5-ish more months to go. We'll get there together, you and me, and whatever cool guests I can round up over the course of the winter. Again, hit me up. Let me know who you want to see on the show. Many thanks again to Benjamin Hochman. Make sure you're following him on Twitter and reading his stuff at stltoday.com and in the paper in St. Louis. For Benjamin Hochman, I'm Tara Wellman. I'll see you next time.